Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining us from the world. Just to say, we're giving it 1 minute for everybody else to be able to join, and we will start shortly. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. We are 2 minutes past our start time. So welcome everybody. Again, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. We're very delighted that you could join us today. My name is Mwandwe Chileshe. I lead external engagements and advocacy at AGRA, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon. Wherever you're joining us, whether it's on Zoom, please make sure you introduce yourself in the chat. If you have particular questions, please drop the questions in the Q&A section. We always like to know where people are joining us from, so if you're able to drop your organization name or which part of the world you're dialing in from, feel free to do so. For those who are joining us on the live stream on LinkedIn, please engage with us in the comment section. We'll also be able to pick up your questions from the comment section on LinkedIn and be able to ask them over here on Zoom. A little housekeeping, as I said, please drop your questions in the Q&A so that we can make sure to sort the questions from just the general conversation. And we'll be able to get to some of those questions during the Q&A, but we'll also attempt to make sure that we're able to address some of those questions as the conversation goes along. If you can't see the Q&A segment, you might have to just click the three dots at the bottom of your screen that say more. And also, I want to acknowledge there's a lot of you that already sent in questions even before the webinar started. We always appreciate that, and we continue to encourage you to do so. So now why we are here today. This is the third session, as some of you may already know, of our Global Shocks series. In the first two sessions, we looked at how geopolitical disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz are driving up fertilizer price shocks across African food systems and the structure transformation that is needed. In both of those conversations, we kept returning to a very key point. And one of those points where this is really a structural issue because the frequency of shocks is increasing. But what we need to ensure is that as a continent, we're able to remain resilient. So today we are trying to shift that lens to another shock that we see coming, El Nino. They're calling this the Super El Nino, and we'll be able to hear from the speakers on the call today why this is so. It's arriving at a African continent. So we know that it's important that we have this discussion and that we continue to think about what do these shocks do for our food systems. Early responses will be the difference between resilience and faltering. There's also not just another thing that we want to do. We always try to make sure that we have an honest conversation when we hold these ones. What are the tensions that exist in the rooms? But also, we know that when shocks hit, governments usually tend to turn inward. Exports gets restricted, borders closed, or the very intra-African trade that would help us be able to stay resilient to such shocks ends up being constrained. So today we will also want to have a chat on food corridors. That being said, help me in welcoming our guests. We're joined, of course, by our colleagues from the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Brenda Lazarus, who is a food security and early warning economist. And then we're also joined by Dominique, and both of them will give us a very unique presentation. We'll also be joined by Dr. Pierre Kamsu, who is from the African Center of Meteorological Applications for Development, and our colleague Tankari from Academia 2063. The bios will be dropped in the chat, but you can also see those flipping through on the screen. With that being said, I want to make sure that we tend to our speakers now. Pierre, checking that you're with us on the call and that you're ready to just tend to you very quickly for your remarks.
Yes, I'm in the call. I'm trying to sit. I'm already set.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Pierre. So as I introduced Pierre, he's from the African Center of Meteorological Applications for Development. And so Pierre, we want to start with you because we know that everything else we're going to discuss today is going to build on the science. So it'll be good to hear from you. What does the focus evidence tell us about the scale, geography, and timing of the approaching El Nino, and which populations and food systems are going to be most at risk? But really, we just really want to be able to hear from kind of regional specific examples, but also what you have been seeing and hearing in the conversations you've been in. To you, Pierre, and really welcome to this webinar.
Hello? Felice, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you just fine, Pierre. Please go ahead.
Yes, I want to share my screen, so I was hoping that will be allowed to.
Perhaps what we will do is just maybe, okay, I think you are able to do so. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So welcome. I'm saying welcome everybody. So thank you for inviting us and to give the floor to Atma to speak on behalf of all the African RCCs, the Regional Climate Centers. So on the upcoming event that we have, this El Nino situation that we are having. So quickly, I mean, this is not everything. So just to remind everyone who we are in ACMA, we are the African Center for Meteorological Application for Development. So this is our mission to be a continental weather and climate center for Africa. So we have displayed our goal, so no worry about this MOU. We have signed MOU with many institutions, so this was one of the last MOU that we have signed so far. So this is our flagship, so and we play a coordinating role in terms of working with all the RCCs in Africa. So we have a mechanism called the ACOF, the African Continental Climate Outlook Forum. So it's kind of similar if you have accustomed to things like the GACOF and even the SACOF in Southern Africa. So they have that at the regional level, but we have a continental level, an arrangement in which we meet to coordinate continental action in terms of climate and potential impact. So today is about talking about El Nino, ENSO. So I think that this time around we have heard it a lot in the media. I think that most of the people here in this webinar, understand what is El Nino. So what I will do here is I'm presenting some of these results coming from the last ARCOF that we had in Lusaka. The upcoming one will be in probably in Windhoek early September, but this is the result from the latest one. So what we have in terms of El Nino, when we talk about El Nino, we mainly look, we know that we mainly look at the what we call tropical ocean. This is where you likely have this reddish color, so over the tropical band. So that's where most of the seasonal variability that we have, like the source of the, let's say, seasonal forecast that we have over Africa. That's where those source come from. So what we have here is just we have just displayed the sea surface temperature. So what you can see is that most majorly over the ocean, like Pacific and even over the Atlantic, you have like the warm areas is over the eastern part of the ocean of the basin. So this is due to what is called a trade wind. So trade wind are the one who are blowing over the surf, blowing over the tropic, and for that one they are pushing warm water over the western part of those oceans. So this is what we have in terms of the normal conditions. So as I'm saying, so this is what we have. I mean, what we have over, for example, if I focus mainly over throughout the Pacific. So in normal condition, what we have is that we have over warm water over the coast. Those what that one generate cloud and rain over the coast, over the western part here, and over the eastern part. American coast is usually cold and dry. That's what we have normal in terms of normal condition. But it happened that those trade wind weaken, and when it weakened, then we have the warm pole which travel eastward, creating cloud and rain over the central and eastern part and the eastern part of the Pacific Oceans. Then for La Nina condition, usually when you hear about La Nina, it's just that then the trade wind have strengthened, and then for that one they are strongly pushing the water over the western part, and for that one you have a very strong cooling over the further over the east part of the ocean. So this is what we have. I mean, the difference. So we keep in mind here that we have the trade wind will play a major role in that oscillation. So the oscillation between the two conditions is what is called ENSO. So here I've just displayed. So we have different way of viewing it. You have just displayed this a kind of what we have in terms of ENSO. I mean, I think that people remind some of this year we have here 1998 and 1989. So here, for example, we have, if we look here, we have what is called the observed sea surface temperature. What we had is was almost like um, warm pole almost over the ocean, Pacific Ocean. If you look at the counterpart for the La Nina, you can see that you had this the central part here was very cold. And when we look for what we have a way of looking that one in terms of what I would call temperatures and normal, it's just a departure from a set reference. So this in this case is from 30 years reference from 1991 to 2020. So I mean, but this one was done previously. So what we had that's the current reference. So what we had by doing that, you can see that if when we remove what we call the reference, you will see that you have that warm pole who have shifted and is now on the eastern part of the ocean. If in the case of El Nino of 1998, and the same thing, doing the same thing, you will see that you have a kind of strong cooling over the central part of the ocean. So this is what happened when we have El Nino. So keep in mind this region. This is where that's what we use to monitor our ENSO situation, or El Nino or La Nina. So we usually say ENSO because it's called El Nino Southern Oscillation. So it's oscillation between what is called La Nina and El Nino situation. So meaning the Central Pacific is either warm or cold. I'm just keeping this picture again, so just to make sure that we have that in mind. Then usually when we have what is called El Nino, I didn't put here La Nina. So what we usually what we have in terms of El Nino, these are the impact over the globe. And if we look mainly over Africa, we'll see that the El Nino have a strong influence in July to September over almost over the Sahel band, and like with bringing dry condition, and then over Southern Africa also from November to April, and over Eastern Africa, we usually have what is the kind of weather condition, unusually wet condition for those areas. So those are the potential impact that we have over Africa. Here, what I've put, because we need to keep in mind that that one is not just an isolated phenomena, and so it's not an isolated phenomena. It's also play along with other interactions. So even if it's the main drivers, You also have other drivers who are playing a huge role. So I've put this table because this is kind of big result that we had from the latest our latest gathering with all the RCC. So here you have like the primary seasonal impact for and so forth from different parts of Africa. You have Northern Africa, Western Africa. Like over Northern Africa is slightly weak. Over Western Africa, this one is well known that it will significantly alter the climate system, like we affecting the monsoon season with dry conditions over Sahel and increasing the flood risk over the coastal uh, Gulf of Guinea. For over Central Africa, we have a kind of strong negative correlation with reduced rainfall over the coastal. And over Eastern Africa, this is also known like when in OND, when it's associated with enhanced rainfall and flooding, from July to September, and usually it's associated with suppress in the northern part of Eastern Africa. So if we only keep the primary impact of ENSO, um, then over the south, so we have like that over the different parts. So this one will be shared with you, but I want you also to have in mind the interaction with the other driver. Like when we look at the Eastern Africa, for example, usually we know that IOD, the Indian dipole, will have a strong influence over that one. So when IOD is positive, usually it counter the effect of the of ENSO, and then you will increase the chance of flood of over the Eastern Africa. So we have some area like that. Like even if I look at the uh, uh, Eastern Western Africa, for example, if I take the 2015 case, we have where we're expecting a dry Sahel, but the Atlantic Ocean play a key role in averting the situation that was most likely set to happen. So we have some situation like that. When in the southern western ocean, Indian Ocean, you have like usually when El Nino occur, we know that we have like for the cyclone season, the cyclone will remain offshore and recurve away from the mainline. So when they occur, so those are some of the effect that we have for those ones. Now, if we focus only on the current situation, so here I've displayed what is observed in terms of SST starting in March this year. So what we have, we can see a progressive warming if we look at the center part of the Pacific from March. This is March to May, April to May. This is the latest one that we have from the latest 90 days that we have. We can see that we have a strong warming, which is building up over there, over the Central Pacific, regarding the eastern part. So if you remember that ENSO configuration that we have, so I want us to keep this in mind, because we know that once the ocean start to warm like that, it will remain for a certain month. And that situation, and what we are seeing here is that we are kind of on an increases phase. So the ocean is getting, that part of the ocean is getting warmer and warmer. Uh, Yeah, so how the thing is, now that we know that, if we focus only on that area, we try to put here in terms of historical context. Here we have plotted all the Niño point 3 index, so the time series over that box, and we are comparing the time series. So what you have in gray is for many years. What you have here in black is like the different climatological reference that we have, and this one in orange is the condition observed last year, for example. So when we look at 2026, we can see that that one is like since April, since let's say mid-May or starting June, we can see that we are in like never observed situation for that area. Like it's just warm. It's warmer than usual. It have never been recorded. Maybe only for this year, for this period, but it was later in the year. But this time around, that one have never been observed before. Doing that, we are trying to look at the what we call El Nino for the different situation. Let's say what is happening in terms of El Nino is just the difference, the anomaly index. We are looking at the picture since 1950 up to now. It was just this one will be updated at the end of this month in a few days. So this is the current situation. This is where we are now. You can see that here we have already hit red side, meaning that we are already, because if you look this threshold of 0.5, we are already in an El Nino situation. So this is where we are going, and I would say that maybe we are going up. So in terms of models, so this is what we have as observation. But when we look at the forecast compared to that, and we see that we are already going up, so we'll continue. The situation is to just continue to go up. So all the model are projecting like, let's say, warming. So at least the peak will be reached for what we see here. That will be around November, December this year. So we have a steady increase of temperature on that part in that part of the ocean. So this is the most recent forecast that we have from the model for that area. And the question is, what we need to keep in mind is that it's already there, and so it's already ongoing. But now the challenge is to know how strong it will be. So most of the model, as you are seeing here, because when you look at this one, usually when we have from model from forecast, usually have chance for each category to happen. You will see that most of the model are giving already like ENSO situation. So there's almost like no chance for other condition to happen. But now the critical thing is how strong would that be? So for now, the reddish, the darker in red you see means that that's most the stronger, the strongest situation we will have. If you look well, it's like the model are saying that most likely in July, August, September, we are turning into like a very strong situation, and that situation is set to stay up to the end of the year, up to the even February next year. So we have a kind of high chance of having those strong events. So it's already there. Now we are monitoring and to see where we are going with this. This is
Yeah.
another way of looking. I will wrap up, don't worry.
Yeah, yes, please, so that we can
Yes.
just get to some of the other colleagues as well. Thank you.
I will, yes. So this is just to compare with other El Nino situation, and what we are seeing is that if you look at this one, at the beginning, this one was comparable to other in terms of strength with or some of those years like 2015, 2016, and even 1997, 1997, 1998. But with all of them exceeding 2.2 degree above the average, but no recent event have evolved in exactly that way. So if we look at this one, we have never recorded, and we'll see what will happen. This is just to look at the order index. We see that the IOD is in place, so it was just to set the scene before releasing the forecast to you. So in terms of forecast, this is what is likely to happen for us. What we not for us. I mean, this is what is likely to happen here. You have the forecast for August to October and for September to November. So what we have is that we are expecting some like a normal to dry condition here over the western part of Sahel, and even include also over the northern part of East Africa, where was Central Africa will be into the dry condition. We are expecting some above range, wetter than usual condition over the central part of Sahel, and also over the southern Madagascar. For the other season, like fall, I'll call it the fall, or the winter, or in that part of the southern part of the continent. So what we have during that period is that we have like this reinforcement of dryness over the central part of Africa. We have enhanced wetter condition, very wetter condition over Eastern Africa, and then we over Central Africa, we are likely to expect some dryness over that area. So these are the recommendations that we have. I will just take a quick point. So for example, for Eastern Africa, when we expect for the condition where we expect normal to above rainfall for those areas. So these are potential impact like flood risk, damage on health infrastructure. So what we are proposing is to activate action anticipatory action protocol, strengthen the healthcare system, promote health and life insurance, operational climate and health service, and reinforce disease surveillance. That's on that side. You will also have the similar over the so this is what we are proposing over the Southern African IOC. So over there we have like normal to below. I will upload this one before sending it to you. Normal to below rainfall. So we have to inform the population of possibility of drought from October to December. We have to manage existing water reserve, strengthen bushfire prevention and monitoring, and plan ahead of the next growing season. So we need to keep in mind that the next growing season will be like we might see a late onset. So that's something that to keep in mind before in our planning, in the planning for those areas. So that's all that I have for you today. I hope I'll take the rest in the questions. Thank you,
Thank you.
Isami.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Thank you very much for the richness and depth of your presentation. I think for many of us, this is detail that we haven't seen before and have to grapple with what does this mean for the different places that we're in. It was really good to see the map that you put at the end, where we can see sort of the severity and in which regions it will be. And I'm quite excited to see our chat engaging. It would be really great to also get any questions you have. Please drop them in the Q&A. There was a question in the chat about ensuring that we're able to share these slides. We've got some folks from media who are also here. I think we'll make sure that these slides get shared with you all. You can see the kind of the focused that Pierre has put up on the screen. I think this is really critical information for us to take in. With that being said, I want to turn the mic over to our colleagues from the FAO who have also got a short presentation for us. Brenda, I hope you are there, as well as Dominique. It's really good to have you on the webinar. I want to turn to you first, Brenda. I know both of you will handle this presentation. One of you will take a continental perspective, and you also try and ensure that we have a regional perspective. So just handing it over to you, Brenda, to get us started, and then we'll kick off with Dominique as you go through the presentation. Over to you both.
Great, thank you so much. So my presentation or our presentation is going to be focused on basically what can we possibly be doing with kind of this early warning information? What can governments and development partners and humanitarian partners do with regards to preparedness and anticipatory action to then basically help to mitigate the impacts of these forecasts? I'm going to start off the presentation on just going in a little bit more detail about what the El Nino will mean for agriculture across these different areas of Africa, and then Dominique will be presenting kind of the programmatic recommendations. So starting off, as was mentioned in the previous presentation, El Nino affects different parts of the Africa continent differently and at different times. So if you look starting off on the western and central parts of the region, as you can see from this graphic here, El Ninos are generally associated with kind of dry conditions during their main rainy season, which runs from June to September. I would highlight that for West and Central Africa, the teleconnections aren't as strong as for Eastern or Southern Africa. And so the impacts on agroclimatic conditions vary depending on where we're looking at the region. And it's a bit harder to predict in comparison to East and Southern Africa. Now, transitioning over to East Africa. So in East Africa, it's a little bit complicated because essentially we see different impacts depending on where we're looking in the region and depending on the timeline. So if you look at western parts of the East Africa region, and so these are areas like Western Ethiopia, South Sudan, the Karamoja region of Uganda, Sudan, Eritrea, these areas generally are unimodal areas, so they have one main rainy season and one main agricultural season that runs roughly from June to September. So in these areas, El Niños tend to drive below average rainfall conditions, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. So if you look at kind of rainfall performance to date, unfortunately, we have seen dry spells in many of these areas since the beginning of April. So even before the El Nino kind of before conditions turned into an El Nino. And unfortunately, we've seen continued dryness across these areas. What I think is particularly concerning is if you look at rainfall during the last 2 months, so in June and July, and even if you add on the 2-week forecast into early August, in a lot of these areas, we've seen rainfall amounts that are less than 60% of what is typical. And some of these worst affected areas, we're basically seeing the driest June to July period on record. So very, very dry conditions across some of these areas. Just give you kind of an idea of what this could potentially mean for national cereal production. The Climate Hazard Center, which is linked to University of California, Santa Barbara, and is also linked to FuseNet, is estimating that on the Ethiopia side, current conditions look very similar to 2015, where we saw dry spells starting in April and then a very poor main Meher season. And that year we saw national cereal production fall by about 14% in comparison to the previous year. So then let's transition now over to the eastern parts of the region, and so the Horn of Africa. These are areas including Somalia, the Asal regions of Kenya, much of the eastern parts of Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. In these areas, these are bimodal areas, so these areas have two main rainy seasons, one from March to May and one from October to December. And during that October to December rainy season, we essentially see above average rains generally during El Nino years, particularly when we see a positive IOD as well. And that tends to lead to widespread flooding. ICPAC, so the Regional Climate Center linked to EGAD, is estimating that current conditions look very similar to 2023 or 1997. And if you look at the October to December period during both of those years, we saw widespread flooding, major displacements, major impacts on agricultural production, and unfortunately deaths in some of the regions. So definitely a major source of concern and something that we really should be acting to try to mitigate those flood impacts now. And then finally transitioning down to Southern Africa. So Southern Africa, during El Nino years, we generally see below average rains during their main rainy season and their main agricultural season, which runs from October to April. Maize is the main agricultural crop in these areas, and unfortunately, maize is highly vulnerable to water stress. And so when we see below average rains, that does generally drive below average crop production. And that does mean that that could potentially have major implications on cereal supplies within the region. The good news, though, is that across parts of the region, 2026 harvests were quite good. We saw record high levels in South Africa and Zambia, and so that could help to mitigate some of the supply issues if we see poor crop production this year. So that just gives you an overview of kind of the implications of these different El Nino impacts on the agricultural sector. Now, let me pass it over to Dominique to talk about both kind of from a preparedness and anticipatory action standpoint, what we could potentially do to help mitigate these impacts. Dominique, over to you.
Thank you, Brenda, and good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Accra. I will continue this presentation, and exactly as Brenda says, looking a little bit more into what can we do. We have the early warnings, we have the information, but how can we turn that into action and timely action? And I first want to start with just give a quick overview of what anticipatory action actually is. So anticipatory action, as you can see on the slide, fits very neatly within the disaster risk management cycle. And it actually means acting ahead of a predicted hazardous event to prevent or reduce impacts on livelihoods and before humanitarian needs fully unfold. And this works best when there is preparedness, so when activities as well as triggers for decision making and financing are pre-agreed and decisions are made to guarantee a release of this financing. I think it's important to mention that anticipatory action is really time-bound, so it is a window of opportunity to implement anticipatory action between sort of an early warning signal comes in and a trigger is met and until sort of the disaster is fully unfolding. And I think this graph nicely shows that anticipatory action is really embedded within disaster risk management and in broader sort of resilience building. So before you have anticipatory action, there are preparedness measures you can take in order to be prepared. And there will usually always be sort of a residual risk, as small as possible if you do preparedness and anticipatory action well, that will need you to respond to any impacts that are being felt on the agricultural sector or other sectors. And anticipatory action as a whole, together with early warning, has a protective intent to protect investments, livelihoods, lives of people, and contributes here with also to longer-term resilience building. So now that we have the terminology a bit clear, I think it's important to understand what are sort of the key elements or things you need to have in place to do effective and impactful anticipatory action in Africa. We as FAO, we focus primarily on impacts on agri-food systems, on the agricultural sector. And I would like to briefly take you through how we, the pillars that we think are important to work on, and some of the priorities that we see in order to really institutionalize further anticipatory action. First of all, the way FAO engages in anticipatory action is really in order to protect and safeguard agricultural-based livelihoods and food security ahead of shocks and to strengthen resilience. And if you see on top of the slide, there's a few elements that need to be in place for that. First of all, you'll need to have risk analysis and early warning system that give you the information and signal that you can use to do your decision making and action. And what we see currently is that early warning systems have been proven to be crucial for anticipatory action, but remain often still fragmented and single hazard focused. So that's why we as an organization, especially also in Africa, advocate for more harmonized multi-hazard risk analysis and triggers, also leveraging emerging technology and innovation, and for instance, including possibilities available through AI. Secondly, predictable and flexible financing is essential in order for anticipatory action to be implemented in a timely manner. And what we see that pre-arranged financing and partnerships around that are growing over the years, but remain also insufficient and highly anchored within the humanitarian space. So what we advocate for is to, of course, increase sort of the finance base, also looking at domestic financing opportunities, as well as blended financing solutions, linking to, for instance, climate financing opportunities. Thirdly, the third part is about the actual implementation of anticipatory actions when that is in place. And what we see is that localization, conflict, and displacement factors, especially in Africa, are essential factors to be considered for impactful anticipatory action in Africa. So we advocate for more attention to that, and related to also government ownership and leadership in this area to be able to align anticipatory action really to the context in the field. Another part is about learning and partnerships. What we see, and I will speak about it at the end a little bit more, is that the evidence base for anticipatory action is growing. There is increasing evidence on the effectiveness of anticipatory action, but studies are often conducted in isolation and not really comparable. So we believe it's important to further invest in evidence generation, joint evidence generation, learning, knowledge sharing, advocacy, and increased partnerships in this area as well. Lastly, integration of anticipatory action in relevant policies, strategies, and processes is extremely important. What we see is that anticipatory action has gotten institutional traction over the past years, but it is only partially embedded within disaster risk governance, resilience building, and other plans and policies of partners and governments. So we advocate for increased attention on that in order to really scale up and further institutionalize anticipatory action. Now, shifting from that, I would like to speak a little bit about how we as an organization are currently engaging in the upcoming El Niño predicted for later this year and in 2027. Just to say that FEO is active across all the previous pillars of anticipatory action that I just presented on the previous slide, especially also in Africa. We have been active in strengthening early warning systems, in supporting with rolling out tools and instruments, with developing guidance and learning products, and we have also financed the implementation of anticipatory action. For example, last year in 2025, this covered 1.1 million people across the continent. We also do collective planning and advocacy. And this appeal that you see here on the screen, which was jointly developed and launched with WFP, is one of such actions. And this appeal was launched last month in June, and it really aims to mobilize support and funding to protect countries in the wake of El Niño impacts. And it has two complementary objectives. One is really to protect local food production in the face of these climate shocks through anticipatory measures. And secondly, also to safeguard vulnerable households' food security and coping capacity through anticipatory assistance that helps families to meet immediate needs and also preserve productive assets. I will go a little bit very briefly into some more detail of this appeal to give you an idea of what are the priority anticipatory actions that we propose and advocate for each region. And this is based on the knowledge that is available, on what has worked in the past, and it is also very much aligned with the cropping calendars and cropping seasons in the various parts of Africa. I won't go through all details, but especially because we spoke already about some of the key risks. But for Southern Africa, where drought is of most concern, we advocate for the distribution, for instance, of seeds and drought-tolerant varieties, anticipatory cash transfers, but also continued dissemination of early warnings to vulnerable population, but also some livestock-related support in terms of feed and animal health. For Eastern Africa, where it's sort of a dual risk, as explained, we kind of advise similar actions, but we also look at actions that more related to flooding, right? So that includes also putting in place flood protection measures, but also post-harvest protection measures, such as hermetic storage bags. Then for Western Africa, it's more looking again at prolonged dry spells and potential drought situations. And here we advise and to disseminate early warnings, the distribution of seeds and drought-tolerant inputs, and cash transfers is also advised for other areas that are affected by drought situations. Lastly, I would like to share a little bit as a last slide on how this work has impacted or had an impact in the past. As I mentioned earlier, there is emerging evidence being generated by actors, including FAO, on the impact of anticipatory actions, the positive impact. And in the last El Nino, which was in 2023-2024, FAO in the same way had developed an anticipatory action response plan. And through this, and in close collaboration with local actors and governments, we have been able to support interventions with a total of $8 million in Africa, which included cash transfers, provision of inputs, capacity building, promoting weather conservation, vaccinations, amongst others. And evidence has shown that this had a positive impact on food security, on food production, and had a positive return on investment. And some of the specifics you can see here on the slide. This is not the only evidence that is out there. And when we share the slides, you can see the two links that are put on the down part of the slides. This gives like a link to a broader article on the impact of anticipatory action that FAO had supported during El Nino. But I would also like to say that last year we have developed a joint publication together with WFP and OCHA that is sort of compiling all the existing evidence of anticipatory action over the years, and the verdict is that it really has a positive impact. It saves lives, livelihoods, time, and also investments. So I really would advise you to also look at that article to learn more of sort of the positive impacts of El Nino in the past. Let me stop here. Thanks a lot on behalf of Brenda and myself, and happy to answer any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dominique. Thank you, Brenda. This was quite rich, and it's good to see the way this information in terms of anticipatory actions also coming off of what Pierre had presented and some of the recommendations that are coming out from their side, and thinking about how do we approach this all as a sector. I think there's a lot of rich information that has come from here. So again, to you, Dominique and Brenda, we will just make sure that we share this presentation you've made with the colleagues on the line as well. What I think, having been faced with a lot of this information, I think for myself, some people in the audience, it can tend to feel overwhelming. But we've also talked about anticipatory actions now, and what does this mean for governments who are seeing this news, who are seeing this impending shock, especially seeing that we've just come from another set of shocks, and thinking about how they respond in times like this. We are joined by Tankari, just wanting to make sure that you are still online with us as we are about to tend to you. Okay, thank you. I see your screen. So Tankari, having heard these two presentations, which have been very rich in depth, I really want you to kind of help us ground us into when policymakers see this, how should they be thinking about reacting? In my opening, I set up thinking about how a lot of the time the instincts for a lot of governments is to then close up, which also impacts the very kind of intra-African trade that needs to be helping us. At Agra, we've been working a lot around food corridors, thinking about places where there's surplus and then being able to take into sort of basins with less production. It would be great to hear your reflections on that, but also what you are seeing and how you are interpreting some of what we've just heard from our three speakers. Over to you, Tankari, and good to have you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Dakar. Thank you. I think this question is really about how Africa can keep food moving where climate shocks happen. So when droughts, floods, or other shocks reduce food production, so naturally government want to protect their own population. So this is something that we can understand. Every government has this responsibility to make sure that food is available for its citizens. The problem is that when many countries close their borders at the same time, so food can no longer move to where it is needed most. So a problem that starts in one country can quickly spread across the region. So that is why, and we also know that the climate shock do not affect every country in the same way. For example, one country might have a poor harvest, while a neighboring country still has enough food. So regional trade is a means that allows food to move from places with more food to places with less food. So this is something that can really help to reduce shortages, to also stabilize prices and also improve food security. At academia, one of our work showed that production changes. So we have production changes which vary from one country to another. So some countries face higher variability or volatility in terms of production compared to others. But if we aggregate it, the overall production, we see that it's less volatile than this individual country production volatility. So this is something important. So it means that we can say that this regional trade is a climate insurance because it can really help countries support each other when climate shock occurs. So this is where food corridors become important. Sometimes or too often we just think that a food corridor as simply a road or a railway, but a food corridor is much more than transport. So it's the whole system that allows food to move from farmers to consumer. It starts with production on the farm. It includes storage, processing, transport, border services, market information, finance, and trade. So all these pieces have to work together. If one part of this system fails, food moves more slowly. So the cost can increase and even the shortages become worse. So when food corridors work well, everyone benefits. So we have farmers that have access to larger markets and are more confident to invest in production. So this is something important. We also have traders that can move food more quickly and at lower cost. And businesses are more willing to invest because markets are more reliable. And importantly, families have better access to food even during difficult times. So that is why food corridors should be seen as climate resilience infrastructure. Just as irrigation help farmers cope with drought, food corridor can also help countries cope with food shortages by keeping market connected. So now, what do we need to make food corridor work? I think our countries need clear and stable trade rules because we know that emergency measures might sometimes be necessary, but they should be temporary and coordinated so that market continue to function. Then we also need to use climate information, or even we also need to use climate information much better. Currently, we have a seasonal forecast that should help government, traders, businesses to prepare before shortages. become serious. We saw from the previous presentation that there are data or information evidence that are being generated to really inform this climate information. So in that case, early action can be taken, which are less costly than responding to a crisis. Finally, I can say that food corridors require cooperation. So it's important to really increase cooperation among countries because infrastructure alone is not enough. Countries need trust, they need coordination so that the food can continue to move when it is needed most. Finally, I will finish with a simple message. We can't stop every drought or every flood, but we can stop many climate shocks from becoming food crisis if food continues to move across the region. That is why corridors are not simply transport projects, but they are systems that keep food, market, and business moving when Africa needs them most. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sankari. It's really good to hear your reflection on that point in terms of we are not going to be able to stop these shocks coming, and what we are seeing is they're coming fast and furious and more frequent. We need to be able to remain resilient in the face of these shocks. And you pointing out that piece around food corridors is an important one, but there's also very many points that were raised by Dominique. We have quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to quickly just turn to some of the questions, as well as I want to address some of the ones we received from our audience even before the webinar had started. To our speakers, I also just encourage you to check in the chat or Q&A to see if you can also engage with our audience there. I'll start with Khalifa Traore. She asks, will the effects be the same for coastal countries as for Sahelian countries? I think this is one that can be posed to Pierre as well as Dominique and Brenda. I know that we elaborated quite a bit on this, but maybe useful for you to just give Khalifa a bit of more of an understanding in terms of, for Sahelian countries, what does this mean in terms of production-wise, or some of the value chains that are present there. So Pierre, if you're willing to jump in, or Dominic, over to you.
Yes, I mean, I will just maybe say, just remind the climate context, and I'm sure that Dominique will bring more insight in terms of food production. So, what we know, I mean, what is expected to come is that we know that we have for the coastal region, usually when we are in a Niño situation, I mean, overside, we know that we tend to the dry condition. So, we have like more dry and usually over coastal, we tend to have some flood risk. We continue to monitor the situation. Currently, what we have, we are likely seeing some of the signal over those different regions, and then we'll continue to monitor. And I'm sure that Dominic and Brenda will give more insight in terms of food production.
Thank you. Dominique, do you want to chime in there?
Thank you. Thanks for that additional response. I agree with that. I think I mean the extent to which it will affect food production. It's important to look at sort of the main cropping seasons. When is the main cropping season, and when it intersects with sort of expected impacts of El Nino. I don't have sort of a quantitative estimation at hand of how it will affect exactly in terms of quantities, but with what is clear, it is, yes, below average rainfall, which is currently being experienced or which intersects in the coming few months with the growing season will have a potential negative impact on yields if not managed well, right? So I think that certainly will have an impact also on production, but I think we also need to keep in mind that usually there's also other contributing factors that influence production, right? So climatic conditions is one factor. There's many others. I mean, there's other shocks that we have had, right, that we are currently experiencing related to economic shocks related to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, economic impacts, as well as also maybe issues of conflict and insecurity in some countries that will also affect generally that. So just to say in a broader context, El Niño is one contributing and potentially negative factor suppressing yields, but that's important to look into the broader and also localized context of production. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Localized context is quite significant. I did mention at the top, and this is for my speakers, that we also really try to aim for addressing what are some of the tensions that exist in this discussion. So we have a question from Martin, which I think might help us get to that crux, and he specifically addressed it to you, Dominique. But it says you raised some really great important points, but it also raises the feeling of here we go again. We've been here before, and these anticipatory actions have been recommended before. The important thing for us to discuss or understand today is, were they implemented on previous occasions? What was their impact? And if they weren't, why not? So that we can really get to call out what are the things that we need to be doing and advising the kind of policymakers and in the spaces and groups that we are in. Over to you.
Thanks for the question. It's an excellent question, and I tried to touch upon it a little bit in my presentation, but in the interest of time, right, you can't really go into the details. I mean, I think it's right. It's a right statement. I think we know these phenomena are recurring. We can predict them pretty well, and also increasingly, I think we have been trying as development partners, as governments, really to anticipate and be ready to put measures in place to reduce the impact. I think evidence has shown that when we have been able to do that, it has have a positive impact on food security, on preserving or even sometimes boosting local production, which has also increased the resilience of households. But there's also challenges, right? I think there's certainly also challenges. I think one of the big challenges often is really to be able to implement within that window of opportunity, right? To be able to act within that window of opportunity before the drought arrives or before the flooding comes. And there's a lot of challenge around that in terms of operational readiness, pre-positioning of inputs, pre-arranged financing that is available that can be released at the time. So these are some of the issues that are still there. I have to say there are positive examples on this, but I think these are some of the key areas that really needs to be more attention from, and also be able to monitor multi risks, right? So what I just mentioned, also we are not living in a single risk area. There's multiple risks impacting different sectors, agricultural sector. So really making that connection and studying that compounding impact will able to help us to design better sort of plans and policy measures to anticipate some of these things. So I can say much more, but in the interest of time, let me just stop here, and I can always complement later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a question that came in prior to the start of the webinar, and it was from Joanna Paul from Malawi, and was really reflecting on the population increase that has happened in Malawi along from 1934 through to 1964 and to present day. And she uses a really nice, a good phrase. It doesn't take a genius to think about what is the impact in terms of being able to feed 42 million people now versus 1.6 million in 1934. And so the country must produce at least 8 million metric tons. So the question she poses is, what radical decisions should be made now to ensure that countries like Malawi are able to get to that kind of production in the face of these shocks? I want to check if Tankari, you have a response, but also Dominic, feel free to jump in, and Pierre, I'll have another question for you right after this one.
Thank you so much. I think the issue of rising of the increase of the population is something that we are seeing in many African countries. So one of its implications, as it's mentioned, is this increase in terms of food demand. So this is an issue that I think is not just Malawi, but many African countries will face in the coming years. But it means that in order to really face this situation, we need to prepare to really make sure that we invest more in our food system to make sure that they are working well and also producing enough food for our population, so healthy diet, so which will be important for our food security and nutrition. So I think investment is something that is will be important for Malawi in order to really make sure that the agri-food system is transformed in order to make sure that it delivers the outcomes that we expect. And in addition to that, trade is something that is important because usually we need to rely on other countries for food that we consume, or at least for some product, which means that we need to really improve regional trade to strengthen it because it's a way to make sure that we have a stable supply for our population. So this is something important. And then due to this climate change that we are facing, or climate variability, as I said, is something also important to focus on reducing the impact of climate variability on agricultural production or productivity. So this is something important to consider for Malawi. And it's also important to make sure that we are creating opportunities, in particular for youth in the agri-food system, because it's not just to work or investing in agricultural production. There are many opportunities, many opportunities along the food value chain that can provide income for household, and this is something important that we need to consider. So I think there are strategies that can be adopted by countries, and even I think this framework, the continental framework, the Kampala Declaration, Kampala Declaration provides this room in order to really make sure that we have agri-food system that works well and also delivers the outcomes that we need in order to feed our population. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Do you want to make a quick comment there, Dominique, as well?
No, I think I'm fine for this question, but I saw another question in the chat. Maybe I can quickly respond to, because I think
Please go ahead.
one or more people are asking about sort of the coverage of the countries that are at risk in Africa. And I just want to refer to sort of the appeal that we had launched, which prioritizes 22 countries, of which 12 in Africa, right? That does not mean that other countries are not at risk, right? They are being selected based on multiple criteria, amongst others, the forecasts that are there, also previous El Niño impacts, and sort of some other criteria as well. And just to say that the appeal in general for East Africa aims to protect 3.9 million people, and the ask is close to 80 million US dollars. Some of that is already being mobilized, so we're not starting from scratch, right, as organizations, but that gives you a picture of some of the estimations and predictions that have been done for Eastern Africa. The appeal also has some for other parts of Africa, right? So, and then totally, I think it was 8 million people. Now I lost the number. Yeah, 8.8 million people is the appeal covering in total. But this is globally, right? This is not only Africa. Just to give you an idea of sort of the impacts or the number of people we predict to be impacted by El Niño in the coming period. So I just wanted to answer that question. Thank you. Over to you, Randa.
Thank you so much. I note that there is also a question around insurance, which is something you touched on, Dominic, while you still have the mic. It's interesting. This morning I came from another discussion, and somebody raised there around if it cannot be insured, it cannot be financed. So I think how we think about insurance and financing also needs to be quite significant for this sector. The question actually was from Sami Waweru, who notes that in Kenya and East African region, insurance penetration, especially in agriculture and livestock, is meager, only estimated at about 2%. So he asked which gaps need to be addressed, and simply posing this to you because you're the person who's helped highlight for us in terms of anticipatory actions, but also happy to pick up on this question post the webinar. But do you have any comments there?
Maybe not in super detail, but I agree that insurance can play an important role also as sort of protection of crops and other kinds of assets. So I think this is still also, as the person that posed the question, is also coverage is still very low, right? In various parts of the world. So I think there's still an opportunity to scale that. I'm not an insurance expert, I have to admit, so I don't know exactly what all the bottlenecks are, but I see an opportunity of really using also early warning information and early warning systems linking to insurance to also reduce sort of how do you say that, the exposure of farmers that are being assured to some risk. So that can make it also that is one of the pathways I would say to make insurance adoption of products better applicable on the context, because it will probably also help, or certainly also help, to ensure that crops are better protected or farmers are better protected. So that's a sort of one pathway I think you can think of when you scale up or advance insurance, but there's obviously much more details to that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I see that we have a question from Leonard Mitzi, a familiar name to this sector. The gap analysis on anticipatory action of FAO WFP of June 2026 is still high, 167 million euros out of 202 million estimate. What are the modalities of domestic resource mobilization estimates to bridge this gap, especially in view of AU dynamics this week, the upcoming Africa Food Systems Forum in Kigali, and the World Bank IMF autumn meetings? Leonard, maybe just a very brief one. I think Tankari also talked about CADAP and that being a significant piece through which we need to ensure that we are mobilizing financing there. But I think for all of the different speakers on the call today, they can kind of touch on this topic, but happy to also pick up this conversation in our next edition of our webinars. But I don't know, Tankari, if you have a comment there right before I go back to Pierre.
Yeah.
Oh, it seems we can't hear Tankari quite well. Dominique, do you have a comment there? Otherwise, we'll throw to Pierre with another question.
I mean, what I can say, I think domestic financing is also what I mentioned in my presentation. I think that's one area that I think deserves more attention, right? I mean, talking more from our development partner UN perspective, we are always there to support countries and regional bodies with this work, and also with work that will help to advocate or mobilize additional financing, whether it's in an international context or domestic context. And one of the contexts I've worked in, for instance, just as an example, we did a project and there had an important aspect on generating evidence, right? Documenting lessons learned, generating evidence on the positive impact of anticipatory action compared to humanitarian response. And what it shows, and what other evidence shows, it's actually cheaper than responding, and it reduces humanitarian needs, which I would say is a very good point for advocacy for moving resources from emergency response to sort of funds that will able to do preparedness and anticipatory action. So one of the ways governments also domestically or regional level can use that also to lobby internally for increased budgets for this. So this is one of the ways that we contribute as an organization. And I think domestic financing is, especially if you talk about more sort of localized government-owned anticipatory action, preparedness and responses, this is a very important element that comes with that, because without financing, it's very difficult, obviously, to implement some of these actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sankari, can we hear you now? Just give it a try in case you have a comment there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you again.
The question, I'm back. I don't think I got
No worries. I think maybe what we do is just if you could, in the chat, there's a few questions there. So also happy to take your perspective in the chat. We're nearing the end of our webinar because we like to end this 15 minutes past. But there is one question that has come from Professor Patrick Ajuang, and he says, thanks for the insightful presentation. But how accurate are the climate/weather projections? Do you think there would be a different prediction if you used physical process-based models rather than time series models? Pierre, are you able to jump in there? There was also another question from Sami, which asked about maybe if you could just show that map again of which countries and the kind of effects that we're going to see. That would be good for our audience. Over to you, Pierre.
Okay, thank you. So am I the one to show the maps?
Please, I think the one you showed in your presentation is a really good one. So for people that might have missed that at the beginning, it might be good. But if you could also just go ahead and respond to that question from the professor.
Yeah, okay. For the response for the professor, I mean, it's a very interesting question, and what I would say is that the seasonal forecasting is one of the area where we have, like, I would say, the most of the skills. So usually the accuracy of that one is kind of good. What we are doing, I mean, we currently do in the different analysis is not just based on the. I understand when they say that sometimes we do based on statistical model, but it's just the downscaling. So one of the things, what I will say that the weakness of this one is sometimes the accurate observation data. That's something that we have over the continent to really measure all the effect and also to have all this combined effect. But I would say we usually, even if we take like that would be like some physical processes does not survive. I mean, at the land side does not survive more than maybe a month, something like that. But at least what we have is like the major signal which come from the ocean. That can be one of my intake on that one, but it can certainly maybe change a bit and also improve the skill that we currently have. Not just like it will not destroy the skill, but I'm sure that it will definitely improve based on what we currently have we have now, and it will be very interesting to, let's say, to improve also the observation network that is currently over the continent, and I'm sure that that will bring a lot of more insight, because some of what we have is that some of these tools, even over Central Africa, for example, that I know very well, what we are just talking about right now is sometimes the effect, like few years ago, even the Indian dipole were not thinking that it was having an effect over the Central African region, and based on the recent observation, they have increased the network there. It's not yet at the point, but with that, what we are trying to, we are seeing exactly how the climate is played over those regions. So I will definitely vote for maybe the increasing of the network observation network. That will also bring part of the fee, but it will certainly improve, to be short in my answer.
Thank you so much. I think that is also a critical part in thinking about what we are saying. If these shocks continue to come, we need to be able to invest in sort of critical infrastructure that helps us be able to have more early warning, to be able to have more anticipatory action. And that is going to also require being able to go into the points that you have raised. I just want to say thank you to all our speakers. We have only 2 minutes, so I'm going to turn to Dominique, Pierre, and then we'll just end with Tankari. Just a quick thank you to our audience. Any last line, and I'll ask you to keep it to just one sentence, but it's a very quick acknowledgement of all of our audience. Some of the questions we weren't able to get to today, but we will try and make sure that we get to answer them over on email, and feel free to also reach out to us. But Dominique, any last line for our audience today?
No, not much. No, just to thank everyone also for the insightful questions. It's really helpful, and we as FEO, we look forward, to working with everyone, governments and other actors, to advance early warning and anticipatory action, not only in the wake of El Nino, but also for other shocks that may come. So just thanks everyone for the rich engagement. And yeah, I'm available also outside of this webinar to further discuss any topics if there's interest in that from anyone. So thank you very much, and thanks for organizing this.
Thank you. Pierre?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks again for inviting us to this webinar. It was very insightful. I also learned very well from FL. I think that they have something that I need on my side for the recommendation. That's a thing about the growing season. It will be something very good to complement. We usually invite them to the ALCO. We ensure that they are there, because I'm sure that they have insightful decision in that recommendation, because this recommendation that we presented was given by the users. not just by us, it was the user during the last ARCOF, and they will be very helpful. We need them there. So that being said, I will say, okay, let's continue to monitor. Let's keep in touch with your different med services and regional center, because updates are coming every month. So we know that we are in changing climate, and we are trying to take the measure to ensure that population and goods are well protected. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Tankari?
Okay, thank you everyone for attending this webinar. My last word is related to food corridors. I think they are key. Shocks, we can't stop shocks, but with better coordination, we can really cope with their impact. And food corridor are instruments that can help us to achieve that objective or reduce the negative impact of climate shocks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think very apt words to end us on. We can't stop the shocks, but we can kind of build the infrastructure and the resilience that's needed to be able to ensure we remain standing strong. Once again, a massive, massive thank you to our audience today, to the speakers that joined us, the insights that you gave. I have realized that I have a bit of a selfish reason of moderating these webinars, and part of that is that I get to learn so much from each of our speakers. So I'll continue knocking on all of your doors and continue encouraging our audience to remain as engaged as you always are. Once again, thank you very much. My name is Wandwe Chileshe. This has been part of our Global Shocks webinar series, and we hope to see you in the next one. We host these every month, so please look out for the one for next month. Goodbye. Have a good day, good morning, good evening, good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.